All right, everybody. Good morning or good afternoon, as the case may be. It is 11 o'clock in Chicago, so it is time to begin. Thank you for attending this PowerCast, Four Technologies You Will Need in the Future by Donna Westmoreland and Scott Clement, both of Mid-Range Dynamics. This PowerCast is sponsored by Mid-Range Dynamics. My name is Ian Cartwright. I'm Education Manager for Common, and if you experience any technical issues during the presentation, go ahead and send me a message through chat. If you'd like to send a written question to Don and Scott about the actual content, for that you can use the Q&A area and they will answer your questions at the end of the presentation as time permits. As I said, presenting today are Scott Clement and Donna Westmoreland. Donna is CTO of Mid-Range Dynamics North America. Experience gained from leading major products, including application modernization at hundreds of corporations, has given Donna a well-rounded view of development needs, audit requirements, and testing principles. Also presenting is Scott Clement. Scott volunteers as a member of Commons Board of Directors, Strategic Education Team, CERT Committee, and Innovation Awards. He's the author of around 1,000 articles and a dozen open source projects, and IBM has named Scott an IBM champion for power systems. So with that, I'm going to ask Scott and Donna to unmute themselves and take us away. Go ahead.
Thanks so much, Ian.
Thanks, Scott.
What I wanted to do today is to talk about what technologies we think, or I think in particular, because Donna doesn't matter that much. No, I'm just kidding. What I think we're all going to need in the future, one of the things that I've been doing for years is watching the trends of what's happening in IT and where are we going as a community and where we're going to be. And so we put together the things that I think you're definitely going to do. These aren't things that I think you might do, the things that I think you're definitely going to do. In some shops that may be already happening, in some shops that may be something coming down the road. You know, in more conservative shops that may be 5 years out, 10 years out, but it's going to happen. And the first one is modern IDEs. So of course, an IDE is where we sit and write our code as programmers. And I go to a lot of conferences. I go to a lot of online forums and talk to people, and you hear the same things over and over again about why they're not doing this yet. And they say to me, we're never going to change. So I keep hearing these same things. Nobody else in our shop uses it, or the boss won't pay for it, or RDI is too slow, or I'm very used to SEU, so I can get things done much faster there. And I get it. I mean, I've been doing this myself for more than 30 years. I've been in the same boat. But once you take the time to get used to these IDEs, there are significant advantages. And you're going to move forward. I know that people keep saying that they're not going to. It's going to happen if you haven't done it yet. And thankfully, a lot of shops have. But you're going to. Because first of all, if you're still using SEU, it really isn't an option anymore, especially for RPG developers. Because IBM stopped adding RPG features to SEU when V6R1 came out, and that was 2008, March, in fact, of 2008. So that's more than 15 years ago now. That means every single feature that they've added to RPG for the past 15 years, think of how long 15 years is. Every single one of those is going to produce an error in SEU. Now, granted, you could just ignore the error and save your changes, and it still works with the compiler. But for example, I brought up a program I was working on recently in SEU just to kind of demonstrate. And notice every single line of code, except for the blank ones, came up as an error. And I mean, you really can't use it. It's really not an option anymore. And people think, oh, I can get things done faster. Are you really doing your company a favor by throwing away the last 15 years of new features that were added? So there's a lot of advantages to switching IDEs. And we just talked about all these errors I was getting in SEU. Well, having support for all these new features makes you more productive. So that's one of the big advantages of moving on. The color themes make things much easier to work with, much faster to program. There's more space on your screen. The ability to view multiple members or multiple sources at once, being able to have them side by side. Support for multiple programming languages. So SEU is fine, I guess, if you're in RPG and you're used to RPG or COBOL or something like that. But as time goes on, we're going to be doing a lot more things. A lot of us today are still working in RPG, but a lot of us are moving on and using things like JavaScript and PHP and other languages that aren't going to work well in SEU. So having one IDE that works for all languages is really nice. Also being able to have multiple computers so that I can be working on things on multiple computers and multiple projects at the same time. Being able to do offline editing, download your code to your PC and work on it while you're on a flight across the ocean or something like that without having internet access. And of course, when you start bringing in young people, people out of school, they're just going to be turned off if you're putting them on green screen. I've heard a lot of people actually quitting their jobs because everybody used green screen and they couldn't handle it. They wanted something more modern. So the two main IDEs that you see people using, not just on IBM I, not just in RPG, but everywhere in IT, are Eclipse and Visual Studio Code. And Eclipse is what IBM built RDI on. They built RDI on top of Eclipse for that reason, that it was very popular. But as a lot of us have seen and a lot of us have heard over the years, Eclipse can feel cumbersome. It can feel slow. It can be a little clunky. If you don't need all of the Java features that it offers, or even in some cases, if you do, you might be happier with a different IDE. So Visual Studio Code in the last few years has become the big thing. In fact, I mentor for my son's high school robotics team. And being someone who, of course, my role there is to help people with programming because that's what I do, right? So I went there and everybody was using VS Code. This is a high school. It has nothing to do with IBM I. They're all coding robots, and that's what they use, Visual Studio Code. When you talk to people in schools, that's what they're using. If you talk to people in colleges, that's what they're using. And it's only as we get to the older and older people that you see people using other things. So I think that's kind of interesting. So what are the pros and cons of the different IDEs? RDI is based on Eclipse, which is currently the most popular, widely used IDE for IBM I, except perhaps SEU and PDM. And it integrates with all the modern change management softwares. It edits source for most languages, like we were just talking about, works with IFS files as well as source members, and IBM fully supports it and develops it. IBM has been boasting, if you will, that in their studies, they've seen developers get a 20% productivity boost by using RDI over SEU. But we already talked about why people are saying no to it, why so many shops are resisting it. One of the big things is licensing can be a real headache. It can be very expensive, and people have the hard time getting their bosses to pay for it. And people find it slow and clunky and confusing. And even what I'm finding, you think, oh, I'm going to move to RDI because younger people are going to like it. And then you find people coming out of school going, oh, you're still using Eclipse? That kind of blew my mind because I had that. I brought in an intern in college, and she took one look at it and said, you're still using Eclipse? Really? Today, you're still using Eclipse? And to me, it was kind of mind-blowing because I thought of this as being modern. So Visual Studio Code is the one that everybody's using today, the young people are using, and it's free. So you don't have to worry about those prices. It doesn't have the performance problems that RDI has. Right now, though, there's a lot of its features that still aren't up to the same level as RDI, simply because IBM hasn't been investing in it for 15 years plus like they have in RDI, but it's getting there. And we are, at Mid-Range Dynamics, we are fully committed to it. In fact, I like our product now for Mid-Range Dynamics Change, MD Change or MDTMS. I actually like it better than the one in RDI. So let me show you these things so that you can get a feel for what I'm talking about. And I'm not going to bother with RDI. I think most of us know what RDI looks like. I'm just going to go ahead and bring up, this is the VS Code IDE. So if you're not familiar with VS Code, VS Code comes with a set of this tab here on the left where it says extensions. You can install all of these different extensions. So VS Code is a general cross-platform tool used across all programming environments. But if I go in here and I install things like Code for I, it gives me all the IBM I features. And for mid-range dynamics tools as well, we've got ours, which we call MD Open. MD Open is our plugin, both the RDI and VS Code one are called MD Open. And that is also an extension. And it's just a matter of going in here and for like the extensions you don't have, like the ones I have down here, all I would have to do is click install and it'll download and install it. So these are very, very easy to install. And it works very much like an app store or Play Store where if there are updates and so forth, it'll give you the option to update them. So it works very well for keeping your system up to date and so forth. The Code for I, the open source tool, looks like this. And I'm already connected to a system here, but basically you've got the ability to go in here and open up your libraries and open up your source files and see what members you've got in them. And go ahead and click on one to make edits to it and so forth. You've also got an IFS area down at the bottom here where you can go in and work with IFS files. So it is a great IDE, a full-featured IDE. One of the things I wanted to show you though is what's brand new for mid-range dynamics is this. So you see this MD Open tab on the left is our plugin for VS Code. And a lot of people have been asking us about this and looking for this for a long time. And so we're very happy to have it now. And when you go into this, it doesn't have all the features yet that RDI does, but the ones that programmers commonly sit and use all day long are here. And so nowadays we can sit and work. That's what I do. I sit and work in this all day long. And in fact, if I go into here, you can see, we've got object requests, we've got RFPs and so forth, as you would expect if you're familiar with our product. But if you go into object requests, you get this. And of course, right now it's coming up unfiltered, showing all of the different object requests that are going on this particular IBM I system and this particular environment, I should say, on the IBM I system. But we've got this great feature in here to adjust this view for whatever it is you want. So you can go in here and click on that and you can choose which columns you want to see. So maybe you don't want to see all of the stuff that's on here. Maybe you don't want to see them. You can uncheck them, or maybe there's something missing. Maybe you want the description column, for example. You can check that and add it to the view. So you can see now I've got the descriptions in here. So you can adjust that. You can also do filters. And I love this filters feature. So I might go in here, for example, and say, I only want to see the things that I'm working on. And I only want to see the things that are at level 17. By the way, if you don't know the answers to any of these things, you can prompt on them. That's what the ... over here is. So for example, if I wanted to pick which application I'm working on today, I could go in here and it gives me a list of them and I can just click on one. So maybe I'm working, in this case, because I work for mid-range dynamics, it's actually the code for the application MDCMS application itself. But anyway, I can go in here and set all these different features and I can give it a name. So I might say MD CMS version 8.5, because that's what this level 17 represents. And I can save it. And when I save these filters, it actually adds it in the navigation on the left. So I love to do this. I'll set up filters for the things I commonly work on, and I'll just go in there. So for example, MD REST for I has been what I've been working on lately. If I go into REST version 14, which is a filter that I created earlier, it gives me, this is actually what I'm working on right now in real life. It gives me the list of things that match that. But then maybe a customer has a support issue and I need to switch to the older version, version 12, to work on that temporarily. I can go ahead and click on the filter I created for version 12. And right now I'm not actually working on one, but that option is there. Now, that's really handy. And it's something we didn't really have before. On green screen, you would have to go to the top and change all of the different filter variables each time. Now it would remember them next time you came in, but it wouldn't allow you to just switch between them, switch between profiles by clicking on them like that. And I just find that very, very convenient for working every day. So let's go through the process of creating an object request. So if you're familiar with MDCMS, you know that an object request is how you check out code to work on it. So as a programmer, maybe I'm going in here and I want to create an object request, and this has got some details filled in from my filter already. The next screen though is where I'm going to tell it what I want, and here I can say what object I'm going to work on. So I'm going to be working on, I just picking something here. This is the C code for Global Secure Toolkit. This is our SSL code in the product, just as something to grab as just an example. It's just what popped into my mind. So I'll go ahead and click next, and it goes ahead and says, okay, well, what do you want to do with this? Do you want to modify it? Do you want to recompile it? What do you want to do with it? So I'm going to go ahead and say I'm opening this to modify it because I want to make code changes. Tell it I want to process selections, and there may be multiple things in this list, of course, but in this case, it's just the one that I told it. Tell it to process that, and so now it has gone ahead and quote unquote checked that out. If I go back to the other tab and refresh it, you'll see that indeed I now have that checked out. And to work on it, all I have to do is click on this pencil icon and it will bring up the code. And then I can go ahead and work on it. And I probably shouldn't have this up here because it probably contains trade secrets. But anyway, you get the idea, right? That's our product. And if I wanted to make a change to it and promote it back, or do what we call an RFP, a request for promotion, I could do that. I don't know what to change here. I'll just put a comment in here. Changed by Scott, and what did I do? I fixed all the bugs and made it perfect. Why not? I'm just changing the comments right now. I'm not actually gonna request promote this, but I just want to show you the process. So once I've got my changes made, I can go in here and say, I want to add this to a request for promotion, or RFP as we call it. So I'm going to go ahead and assign to an RFP. It's going to bring up the list of open RFPs, and I happen to have one called dumb comment change that I made in advance for this purpose. But of course, if I didn't have one already, all I'd do is click new RFP and I'd get a screen to add it. But I've got one here already, and I will go ahead and assign that. And now that I've got that, I can go ahead and oh, by the way, the RFPs are also listed on the left in navigation. So if I go to I could click on active RFPs, or I could have a filter that, just like the other stuff where it's just the RFPs for me, and I can go in here and see what's going on there as well. But anyway, back to what we're doing here in this REST v12 version. I can go ahead and go into the actually, well, I could do it through the active RFPs too. Where is that? Oh, this is again, this is all of them. So let me get the ones for REST at level 16 was the one I was working with. So there it is, dumb comment change. I can click the up arrow icon here to submit that RFP. You'll notice when I mouse over it, it gives me a tooltip telling me that that's what that is. And I'm not actually going to do this because, again, it's just a comment change, and the comment change would be it just says that I fixed all the bugs, which honestly isn't true. But anyway, if that's how I would submit the RFP, I would just click confirm here, and it would go ahead and I guess in Git terminology, that would be committing it back to the repository, or pushing it back to the repository. In our terminology, that's called an RFP, or request for promotion, and that would move that back to the repository. So as you can see, we've got a full set of powerful features here for using MDCMS in the VS Code environment. And hopefully you can see how powerful that environment is. Oh, another thing I wanted to show you while I was in there, which of course I left, but all right. If we go back to the VS Code environment, another thing that I just particularly like about this, if I go in here and I'm in the middle of working on a code like this, I can go to the code explorer, and there's this list of open things here, which is nice. If I click on one, I can do like open to the side where I've got 2 copies of it open. And this is really cool too, because if I make changes in one, the same change will be made in the other one as well. So I can use one of these to like look at one part of the code if I want to, while making changes in the other one. I just think that's a really nice feature. It's also got things like an outline view like you would expect. It doesn't work for C. I should have put up an RPG example, but if this were an RPG example or many other languages like JavaScript, I'd have an outline view there. So it's really a powerful environment. You can see how nice the color changes are. I can go in here and change the color theme. Maybe I want to have a light theme instead. I can do that. Honestly, that's too bright for me, but it does exist. If that's something that you like, you can do that. So anyway, can't show you all the features. There's too much to show you. But with that, I'm going to turn things over to Donna to talk for a while and give myself a little bit of a rest, and she'll talk about CI/CD and dev pipelines. So please go ahead when you're ready, Donna.
All right. Thanks, Scott. If you'll, and he's going to be my monitor for the PowerPoint. So he's going to go to the next screen for me and we'll get started. So Scott talked to you from a developer's perspective and talked about new technologies and things that are there to help the developer. What I'm going to talk about is a little bit higher level than that, and that has to do with how we manage all of those wonderful things the developers dream up in a way that is appropriate for the enterprise. So that's making sure that the enterprise is going to be able to accurately move their changes, test their changes, make sure that things move to production the way they're supposed to. One of the key technologies that helps us to do that is CI/CD pipelines. CI/CD pipelines are based on DevOps and the ability to manage changes across the board. Sorry, guys. Not only from the development side, but also across the enterprise and into the operations teams, the testing teams, everybody working together. So DevOps is a strategy that helps us to do that. And that's not specific to any one platform. It's a very high level concept of how do we want to make sure changes happen the way they're supposed to. And we've been doing things similar to this for a long time on the IBM I. But what we haven't done very well on the IBM I up until now is to manage things in a very agile process. In other words, making sure things happen very, very quickly. We grew up in the world where we took weeks and days and months sometimes to make changes. And so now what we're doing is transitioning so that we can support mobile and web and all of these technologies that require changes all the time, not just once every 6 months or once every month. That type of cadence is not very realistic these days. So if you'll go to the next slide for me, Scott. The thing that helps us to manage how we're going to make changes is going to be through our project development strategy. And there is a number of new strategies out there on how to make changes and manage changes across the enterprise. One is the standby that we've used for many, many years called Waterfall. And Waterfall made sure that we did our changes in a very consistent way, and we did everything one step at a time. So that means that we would do all of our development, our planning effort first, our analysis, our coding, our testing, and then on to production. And sometimes those projects would last a month. Sometimes they would last 6 months, but it was a very time consuming process. And in the world we have today, the requirements can change before we ever even get through the coding process. All of a sudden requirements are different because the world has changed. Things are different than they were when we started our project. So waterfall is not very helpful for us anymore, and we need to move towards a more agile environment. And agile is all about speed. It's all about having things in very small, compartmentalized changes, moving them very quickly, iterative changes, moving more and more changes out as they are completed, but have a cycle that is like a Scrum cycle, which is about 2 weeks to 4 weeks long, very, very quick. Now, when we live in the IBMI world, things are a little more complicated than in other platforms sometimes, and that's because we have very strong dependencies between applications, between databases, and we have to be very cognizant of that. So one of the approaches that a lot of large enterprises take is something called a hybrid agile. And hybrid agile means that I am doing a combination of long projects, but while those long projects are working, I am still doing my small projects and getting things out and getting things taken care of. And if we're doing changes for the web or we're doing changes for our mobile apps, we can address those very, very quickly. And they don't interfere with the big projects that we have. But we have to have tools that help us to do that. And Scott, if you'll go to the next screen for me. So when we talk about adopting this DevOps concept and talk about how quickly we want those changes to happen, then the next thing that we have to think about is, do we have the right tools in place? So this is the other piece of the technology side of things. And it's really key to have the right things for each of the platforms that we work on. So some platforms can perform things differently. Some coding in different languages have different requirements. The IBM has its own unique set of requirements, primarily when we're talking about how do we manage database changes, dependencies, and those types of things. So when we're talking DevOps here, we're talking about coming up with a plan and a strategy to make these things happen and to initiate an automated way to manage this. So I know I could do it all by hand. I know I could pass it all around, tell everybody by email how to go to the next thing and do this, but that's very time consuming. So we want to automate those processes as quickly as possible. And by the automation, we're also eliminating risk, because the less human intervention we have in it, the less risk that's going to be involved in somebody missing something, forgetting something, doing something incorrectly. So if you'll go to the next screen for me, Scott. So what we're talking about here is building a tool to help us to do that. And you have probably heard the terminology CI/CD, continuous integration, continuous delivery. It's critical that your organization takes this into account. And CI/CD pipelines have been very popular for the last few years on the open system side of things. And we have been using change management for a number of years on the IBMI side of things. So we're doing something very similar, but we need to have an integration between those two worlds so that they know about what's happening in each environment, but also can automate more and more of those functions. So what we've done at Midrange Dynamics is we have designed our tool to support a CI/CD pipeline. So that's making sure that we have the ability to get things through our pipeline, through our DevOps cycle, like we talked about earlier. We have to plan, code, build, test. And the whole time we're doing this, we may be doing it all on the IBMI, or we may be communicating with other tools throughout that process. And it's important that your change management tool can do this. It has to be able to support pipelines. It has to be able to support that connectivity to the outside world. That's what keeps you relevant. So if you're off in your own world doing your own thing and telling everybody, no, we can't do that stuff, then what you're doing is you're talking yourself out of being a player. in your organization. And it's critical as an IBMI proponent to be out there, to be sure that you're communicating with people and saying, yes, we can participate. Yes, we can do those actions as it's needed. And we're going to follow the same strategies and auditable processes that everybody else does. We don't want to be an exception. We want to be part of the growing and modernized way of looking at the world. So here you can see we interface to things like Jira, ServiceNow, Azure Projects. For development, you can choose where you want to do your code development. Some of our customers still do code development in their source members. Some use Git repositories. MDCMS doesn't care. Our tool is designed to interact with whatever tool you've decided is the best place to manage your source. Now, we all know, anyone who's worked with Git on the IBMI knows that is not a change tool. It is not a CI/CD pipeline. What it does is move source around. It does a great job of that. It does a great job of merging things, but it doesn't build test environments. It doesn't build objects. It doesn't understand dependencies and relationships between programs and files. It doesn't understand binding. It doesn't know those things. So we have to have a tool that understands the I to help us with that next part of the process. Because as soon as we have coded our changes, the very next thing we're going to need to do is test them. Whether it's a unit test as a developer, or it is a quality assurance test by another team, or even a user acceptance test by my user community, whichever step I'm going to need for testing, I need to have those tools available to me as well. So we want to make sure that whatever we're building is executable and that we have an environment we can execute it in and do a good, strong test. That's one of the things auditors are always looking for. It's a critical part of our process. So no matter how brilliant we are in the coding, if we can't get it tested and we can't get it approved and we can't get it moved through the process, it's going nowhere. So we want to make sure that we're part of that process and we have good, strong tools to help us to do it. The one nice thing that MDCMS has done that we don't see very often in the industry is the ability to orchestrate the pipeline and push things out to every system it needs to go to, whether it's .NET code and it needs to go to a Windows server, or it is IBMI code, or it's something that's running in Linux or Unix. I can tell MDCMS initiate a tool to help us to do that on that platform. So each platform gets to use the tools that are most effective for that platform. So it doesn't have to be one size fits all. In fact, we encourage you to use the best of class in each of those areas of development to make sure that you're using the tools that are best suited for the needs of the organization. So MDCMS can orchestrate the pipeline and ask those other tools to participate. Or if you already have a CI/CD pipeline in place, maybe Azure DevOps or Bamboo, or there's several variations on Git that have full pipelines associated with them, we can participate in those pipelines. Now, the way that we do that, and the reason we can do that, is REST APIs. So we use those REST APIs to communicate back and forth between our tools and everybody else's tools to make sure that we have the tools in place for our organization internally on the I and for the other organizations that are also participating in our CI/CD pipeline, so that we can communicate back and forth and know what's successful, what's unsuccessful, allow recoverability, all of those types of things. So building a CI/CD pipeline is critical to success. If you'll go to the next screen for me, Scott. The next screen is probably the one that I spend the most time working with people on these days. And it is, how do I build a CI/CD pipeline that's going to work within my organization? So in other words, I have to follow a certain set of steps to help someone be successful in making this happen. Critical to us, of course, is always to start with the very beginning. Here's my request. How's my request coming in from Jira, from ServiceNow? It needs to fit into my IBMI structure in MDCMS. We bring it directly in from those products, and we have bidirectional updates to make sure that we can update statuses and custom fields to bring that data along throughout the process. Whether updates are happening from the initial tool where our requests were logged, or it happens from within MDCMS, we can reflect that in each product. So knowing what that strategy is going to be is key. Knowing you have the right tools in place is the next piece in that puzzle. We want to make sure that our customers have the tools they need to be successful. MDCMS in the MD Change tool suite are the tools that helps us to make it a successful venture for our customers, to make it easy for them to make the transition from older legacy change management products that have no integration to other tools, or have cobbled some integration to other tools, that it's not being successful. So we know MDCMS is successful. We have tried and true customers that can speak to that, can speak to how much difference it made in the way their business runs. And it really does make a business more effective. From the I side of things, it helps the developers stay where they need to be, off doing the development work. It allows everybody else to manage the changes as they move through the testing processes with a minimal amount of manual steps and information having to come from the development team. So it lets the development team focus on what they do best, and that's those development efforts. After we define what our testing tools are going to be, what dependencies we're going to need to identify external to what we have on the IBMI, then we can definitely include that into MDCMS as well. And that's also something you always need to identify. And if you already have a current CI/CD pipeline, you need to know that so that you know what you need to be incorporated into. Automation is the key to everything. That's what CI/CD pipelines are all about, is automating change processes, making them as quick and as smooth as possible. One of those features is to automate testing, automate deployments, do the things, notifications even can be automated. And that's a key factor, is knowing where we are today, knowing what's going on and what's coming up next. And then, of course, as we go forward, the most important part of this is the concept of agile, iterative changes. So we evaluate and we adjust for new processes. One of the things that we like to see in MDCMS is that, or think of, I should say, this is one of our strategies with MDCMS, is that we think of it as an evolution process. We don't want to cause a revolution on our development team. We don't want to change everything they're doing at once. We want to make that a clean and smooth transition. So we want to start with a small set of changes, build on that, build on that, build on that, until they are working with a full product suite of things that are available to them. And it's happened in a way that no one feels overwhelmed and no one feels like they don't know what they're going to do next. And that's difficult when you look at the demographic of the developers that are in our environment. We have some young people coming in, but we also have some people that have been doing things the very same way for the last 30 years, and they have to be brought along as well down this path. So one more slide for me, Scott. So really what we've been talking about here is a set of tools that helps us to do that. And with MD Change, we have tools already built, already ready to roll, that help you with that process. MD Workflow is our project management integration. It is also the tool that manages our CI/CD pipelines. So it handles all the enforced workflow that we need to do. It helps with the automation of the process. And the way that we do that is REST APIs. The way those REST APIs were built is one of our other tools that Scott's going to talk about in just a few minutes, called MD RESTify. It is actually the tool that allowed us to very quickly automate these features and make them available to our customers, so that we could talk to Azure or Jira or SonarQube or any of the other dozen different tools that are out there that we needed to be able to interface to so that our customers could have a strong pipeline. In addition to that, of course, MDCMS is probably the most commonly heard tool that's associated with mid-range dynamics, and it is our core change tool. It is the tool that holds all the configuration data. It's the guy that facilitates the changes. It's the one that makes sure that the objects get built in the right environment, that with the right create command, with the right security on them, all of those things that we know we need to have there, along with understanding dependencies and relationships. And MDXREF helps us to do that. And the cross-referencing tool built into MDCMS is a very extensive cross-referencing tool. It understands dependencies. It understands SQL objects. It understands long names and short names. It understands binding and knowing the relationship of how objects need to be bound together. And it allows us to do cross-platform dependency checking. In other words, I can scan source in that's sitting in a Git repository that's PHP code or Java code and look for files that are being referenced, programs that are being called, and create relationships so that everybody can be aware that there's relationships between those applications and those particular objects themselves. MD Open, Scott already gave you a quick introduction into MD Open with VS Code. He also mentioned we also have it for RDI. We do also still support green screen for developers that are still green screen development teams. All of those IDs are available to you. You choose which one is the best fit for you. We do suggest you utilize MD Open with one of the two, RDI or VS Code, because it gives you so much functionality on one single screen. And that just makes you more efficient. And that's the important part of that process. The last two tools that I'm going to mention are really critical to big projects, especially modernization projects. Probably the one that we most commonly talk to customers about these days are resize projects. I need to expand fields. I can't afford to expand the field because this particular file has 1 billion records in it, and it has 100 indexes built over it, and it's going to take us hours and hours and hours to convert that data, and we don't have hours of downtime. So MD Transform and MD Rapid help us to do that. MD Transform is a tool that generates insert SQL statements for us, allows us to transform the data, eliminates the need for almost all conversion programs or post-install plug programs to put data into a field. MDCMS can help us all do that very easily with very little SQL knowledge. And it builds that insert SQL statement for us. It validates it. It makes sure it works. It lets us test it. And it becomes part of our installation process, which makes things a whole lot quicker. It also is the tool that helps us to refresh our test data so that when we're doing testing, we can always quickly and easily bring that test data along as well. MD Rapid is probably one of the most powerful tools we have out there because it allows us to make changes very, very quickly. So in a matter of a few seconds, I can actually install a change into production. And the reason that I can do that is MD Rapid allows me to stage that file and populate it and build all its indexes and keep it in sync with production up until the time I want to go to production. And then I literally do a move out of production of the old file and move in the fully populated new version of the file with all the indexes in place. So it's sub-seconds of locking on that file. And that can make all the difference in the world of, can I make this change or not? So these are all the tools that are part of MD Change that are all designed to take all of that wonderful code that you guys can generate and make sure it makes it through all the hoops it needs to make it through so that you can successfully implement it into production and do it safely with the least amount of risk. Thank you so much for letting me talk to you a little bit about this technology, and I'm going to turn it back over to Scott.
Thanks so much, Donna. MD Rapid is one of the tools that just blows my mind because I'm used to working in an environment where if we wanted to make changes to a popular file like the item master, customer master, something that's very widely used, it would mean having a day of downtime, finding a weekend when no one was working, things like that. And with that, it's less than 5 minutes of downtime. I mean, it takes longer to do than that, but the actual downtime is only a couple of minutes. It just blows my mind. Really wish I had had that many years ago. Anyway, what I wanted to talk about is the power of REST APIs. This is another technology that I know that everyone is going to be using, and a lot of people are already. And I think, though, over time, it's going to be a must technology. And what REST APIs are is a way to call routines or programs over a network. So historically, people used things like run remote command or start PC command, things like that to just run something on another computer. And they work, but they have serious security problems, and they're not always that performant. And then people started using things that were purely data exchange like EDI, and that worked, but sometimes you need programs to be reacting to the data. So REST APIs are secure, fast, and will let you call things over a network. And that's one of the things that has made it so popular. Another thing that has made it popular is a lot of people have been moving applications to the cloud. So if I'm running my, I don't know, for example, I'm running a CMS for, not CMS, CRM was what I meant to say. Let's say that I wanted to use HubSpot as my CRM, or I want to use Sugar, or I want to use Salesforce or something like that. And I'm still running the rest of my applications in-house on premises. Well, how do I integrate these? How do I make my on-premises application talk to my cloud application? And REST APIs are a powerful and secure and fast way to do that. Of course, there's lots and lots of other examples of that. People having web pages that need to accept orders that communicate with their actual system. People having mobile apps that need to communicate and get information, even if they're only used internally, with things that are on their back-end systems. Their IBMI might be where they host the main part of their data. So REST APIs have become super powerful for all sorts of different purposes. And I really think that everyone is going to be using them. MD REST for I is our REST API tool. And so this shows examples of the kinds of things you might use it for. A mobile application may talk to your IBMI or a web page, or it might be something like an EDI exchange where you're talking to a business partner, or it might be IoT. As I mentioned earlier, I'm a mentor for a robotics team. Well, more and more robotics are becoming the standard for business. For example, Amazon, how do they pick their inventory? They have robots. Robots go and get they actually lift up the shelf unit and bring the shelf unit to the worker on the dock who loads things into boxes. But how do they know what's on the order? How do they know where to go in the warehouse to get it? That's all stored in a back-end database system, similar to an IBMI type of application. And so those IoT devices are using REST APIs to communicate. As time goes on, more and more of the tasks that we do manually today, including things like driving cars, including things like manufacturing, which is already a lot of that is replaced by robots. More and more of that is going to be done by robots. And as IT people, that's great for us because we program the robots, but how do we communicate with those robots to our back-end systems? And that's where IoT technologies come in, and MD REST for I makes that easy. And I hope to be able to show you that. My project for the last several months has been working on version 14 of MD REST for I. One of my goals when I came in and I looked at what we had in our existing version, our current production version is version 12, I looked at that and I said, these are the places that I want to focus on making it better. I want to make it cleaner and easier to maintain for customers. I want to improve performance. Supporting RPG is critical on IBMI, but currently that was all we had in version 12 was RPG. So I want to support all the other ILE languages as well, especially COBOL, which a lot of people use in their business applications. And so I've been working on this, and my coworkers have started referring to this new version 14 as the SK edition, named after me. And I have been working with REST APIs since 2001, before they were even called REST APIs. And so taking all of my years of experience, all the things that I have learned in my open source tools about REST APIs, in my my experience with implementing them for people all over the world, and incorporating that into a product where we can streamline everything, make it the best that it can be, and make it as easy as possible for customers is really what I've been doing. And I'm really excited about it, because being able to take something that you've done for years and really do it better than it's ever been done before, it's just an exciting thing and just an exciting opportunity for me. So that was why I joined Midrange Dynamics originally. I've been with Midrange now only since October, but it's just been lots of fun. So I'm very eager to show you some of the stuff that we have, and I'm going to go ahead and do that here. Let's take a look at, I'm going to bring, how do I get this screen to switch here? I'm going to bring up, what do I have open here? Okay, so this is, this Java, JSON document you see on the screen is an example. Now, where my office is located, where I'm sitting right now, I'm upstairs from a bicycle store. They sell bicycles and bicycle parts. And this is an example of something that I just made this up. It's not from them, but it's an example of something that a bicycle store might use. You know, we want to order some, we want to keep track of what we've got in stock, communicate what we've got in stock, or maybe it's used to communicate a stock transfer or an order or something like that. But it's a list of bicycles in different departments and their attributes and so forth. So if you can imagine a REST API, you would typically use this as what it sends back and forth. So if you want to say, I'm transferring this stock from one store to another, from a warehouse to a store, you might use a REST API, call it and say, okay, here's the stock that I'm transferring, just as an example. So then the next question, and the thing that I hear all the time in the community, is how do I make a program to receive and process this? You know, especially in the IBMI and the RPG world or COBOL world, people don't know how to do that. So that is where our tool MD-REST4I makes things easy. And I'm in the interface for it. It's a web-based interface. And let's go in here, and I'm just going to say, I'm going to create a provider. So this is going to be something sits on the IBMI, and it waits for someone to call and say, I want to transfer inventory, or whatever it is that it does. So I'm going to say bike store demo as the title of my API, and say transfer stock between bike stores, and we'll write a program. We'll call it bike store, I guess, RPG. I'm just going to keep it. You can see this is generating into a QRPGLE source file, or whatever source file I want. I can change this. I can change the library. I can change the object library. I'm also going to say we're doing a post request, which means we're going to do both a send and a receive of the JSON file. So it's going to send a JSON file, for example, to say this is what I'm transferring to you, and then it's also going to send one back. So maybe that's to confirm, or maybe it's to show what they currently have in stock, or what, you know, depending on what the application does, obviously. So as you can see, these are just simple fields that I fill in. There's not much to it. But that's kind of the whole basis of MD-REST4I, is having a form with easy to fill in fields. Now, a lot of this stuff, a lot of customers won't use. Some might. If you're offering this publicly to the world, you might want to do things like set up global definitions and licenses. But the point is, the open standard for APIs, which is called the Open API Standard, or Swagger, has all of these options in it. And so we make it easy for you to provide these options. They're just simple fill-in fields. If you don't need them, no problem. Just leave them at their default values and we'll be fine. And so this general tab has things like that. The top of the, applies to the whole thing type of options. But if we go to the paths, for some reason Zoom went into drawing mode there. Sorry about that. This is where I can define what documents and so forth I want to work with, or rather, this is the different URLs and responses to the URLs. Schemas is where we define the documents. And right now there is no JSON document. So one of the biggest challenges, if you're coding this yourself, if you're doing this with one of the free tools out there, is how do I get that document in the format that I need? Maybe my stores are all out there already and they're already expected to be in that JSON format we were looking at in VS Code. And how do I make it do exactly the same format, exactly the way that I've been asked to do this? Well, we'll go ahead and we'll create what we call a schema. And we just give it a name here. I'm going to call it, actually, I'll just call it Common PC for Common PowerCast, just so I can remember why I did this. And when I click continue, here is where we can define our JSON document. So you can put a Swagger document here if you want, but I'm actually going to put the actual payload document, the actual document that we want to transfer and receive. I'm just going to put it in here and say import this. And you can see that it figured it all out, created a tree. If you look over on the right here, as I click on these, you can see that it has figured out what all of these things are and how they're defined and so forth. So it's got all of this all figured out for me from the JSON document. And then I can go back to my paths and say this path slash bike store R is what I called it in this case. It's just it defaults to be the same as the name of the program. I can say that when I do a request, I want to use that schema. So I can say the Common PowerCast schema is what I want to use. So that is that JSON document. And likewise, I might say when it sends a response that I want to use that document. So I can go over here to responses, and 200 is the normal response, the one that if there's no error, it will send. And I'm going to say I want that to be a JSON document and that I want to use the Common PowerCast for that as well. And then what this is doing, all of these screens, as I'm going and filling in these fields, is it's generating this. This is the Open API Standard or Swagger document. If I want to, I can edit this directly in here. I could go in here and change this to be whatever I wanted it to be. I can make changes here. It's perfectly fine. But the point is I can do them much nicer in the form fields where it's just much more user friendly and so forth. So if you're working with another tool, you might be stuck, editing this document directly, but with our tool, it kind of does all that for you. So that's really, really cool thing. And then once I've got that, my fields all filled out, I can go in here and tell it I want to generate a program. Now this is the older version, so that's my caveat to this is still the production version 12, because this isn't completely available, isn't completely written yet for version 14, but it will be, and I'll show you kind of how that works. So I called it Bike Store R, and it's in the MDR tutorial library because that just happened to be the default that came up. So if I go back to my VS Code and I've got that library already open. Let me refresh the members here. I should now have my bike store. Here it is. I'm going to go ahead and open that up. And this was all generated for me. But again, this is the old version. So you can see what it generates in the old version. It generates a mix of fixed format RPG and free format RPG. And it's got code that goes in here and says, okay, this is the stock document. I want to, find out how many array elements there are, loop through the array elements, and get from that the department and the category fields and so forth. So you can see that this is managing the JSON, but it's kind of sophisticated code, or you might say a little hard to read code. It's kind of complicated. So with version 14, what I wanted to do is make this cleaner and easier to follow. And the way that I thought would make this as easy to do would be to use RPG's built-in data into and data gen opcodes. So let me open up an example that's using that version 14 approach. Got one here somewhere. Here we go. And we'll put them side by side so you can see what the difference is. But so this is the old version 12 code. And here's where it's processing the JSON. In version 14, what it does is it defines a data structure that matches the layout of the JSON document. So to refresh your memory, in the JSON document, we had a stock element, which was an array of data structures. That's what this square bracket means. It means array, and the curly brace means data structure. And then it's got fields for the department and the categories and the sizes and the colors. So in version 14, it's going to take that and it's going to generate this. And so we'll have, our data structure stock, which is an array, and it'll have a department field, and it'll have the category fields and all the other things that are in that document. And then it simply does a data into opcode to load that into your data structure. So this data into is smart enough to know that when you don't provide data here, it's going to automatically go and get it from the API. So it's going to get the data that was sent, load it into this input data structure. So the input data structure is this. And then from there, you're just working with a data structure in your RPG, which makes the code very clean and simple and easy to work with. And so in this case, I'm just taking it for the sake of a simple example. I'm just taking what was sent as input and copying it to the output data structure. And then it uses data gen to send the output data structure. The output data structure is actually just pretty much the same data structure, just to keep it simple. But the point is that in MD REST for I, you don't have to code any of this, right? You can just paste in either a Swagger document or your payload, and it will generate an API for you. And likewise, when you're doing a call to an API, the same process applies. So maybe instead of providing an API in my system, I'm doing a consumer, which makes the call to an API. And if I had that, it'd be the same thing. I can paste in either the payload or the Swagger document, and it will generate the program code to call that. So this graphical interface just makes this super easy and saves us tons and tons of programming time. Now, of course, the one thing we don't know is what is your business logic, right? What kind of calculations do you need to do? What kind of database access do you need to do? Things like that. That you'll go in and code. Now, it can, by the way, generate the messages from a database structure. I have not found that to be particularly useful for public APIs, but if you're doing something internal, that works. The problem is that the field names in your database usually aren't what you want to send out to the public. So for public APIs, you would typically not generate directly from database, but yeah, it even has the ability to generate directly to and from a database record if you want it to. So very powerful, very simple, and it just saves people so much time. It's just amazing what we can do in both the older version 12, which I demonstrated for you, but also the version 14. One of the things that blew my mind when I was putting this together, and version 14 isn't completely done yet, but I've got a lot of it working and tested. And what I found was interesting was my coworkers were saying, oh, this generating a data structure and using data into, how can that possibly be as fast as the way we're doing it? So they immediately went out and benchmarked my code, and they wanted to see if my version of it was they were trying to show how slow my version was going to be, because they thought they were right. And my version ended up being 16 times faster than their version. So not only is it cleaner code, but it performs a lot better too. And I really proved myself that day. It was a great day for me. It felt really good. Anyway, so that's what I wanted to show you. We have our 4 technologies that I think everyone is going to be using. We had modern IDEs, we had CI/CD pipelines, and we had the REST APIs. And I really feel like, watching the industry, seeing how things are going, everyone is going to be using this. You may not be using our product, you may be using someone else's, but you're going to be using this type of technology. And I think it's worth taking a look at our product. In fact, that's why I chose to come to Mid-Range Dynamics, is I want it to be where the industry is going. And I think our products are really the way to do it. So with that, I think we're ready to start answering questions.
Yeah, we are a couple minutes over the hour, but we will answer the questions that we have. If anybody does have a hard stop, be aware that this is being recorded, and a recording of the event as well as the slide deck that Scott was talking over will be available on the Learning Management System at Common by the end of the day. Scott, I did see that you had been answering questions when Donna was speaking, but there are some new ones that we could handle verbally. Can you share recordings? Yes, I said that'll be on the Learning Management System. You see a question from Jeffrey and from Juan. Scott, which ones do you think we should answer?
I can answer the one from Jeffrey. Yes, we do have an interchange interface to sign on or CA2E. Absolutely. Feel free to reach out to us. We'll be glad to tell you all about it.
So cool. Yeah, I've been trying to answer the questions as we go along. But some of these might be worth doing where everyone can hear it.
Yes.
I guess.
Yeah. How do you link the API to a page on the internet is one of the open questions then.
So typically, if you're writing a page on the internet, typically what you have is you have JavaScript code running in that page that will do what's called an AJAX request. And AJAX is basically calling an API. That's what AJAX really is. So that allows you to have the page open and have people interacting with the page. And as it's doing that, it makes the API request. And then of course, the older way, or perhaps depending on what you're doing, might be a better way, is to submit the page back to the server, and then the server can make an API call. So in any case, it integrates perfectly with web technology.
All right, last chance to send in your questions. Put them in the Q&A right now while we're waiting for any last questions. And again, many of them have already been answered by Scott. But while we're waiting for the last questions, I'll say again that the recording from today and the handout, the presentation slides will be available on the Learning Management System later in the day. I think we send out an email when that's available. So you should get that email by tomorrow morning.
I really appreciate all the feedback that I've been getting from people here. People have been talking about wanting to see more of this at conferences and things like that. So we will definitely give a lot of thought to that. I appreciate everything. I appreciate you all being here. It was wonderful.
Yes, thank you so much.
Okay, why don't we go ahead and end there then? Thank you, Donna. Thank you, Scott. Thank you for everybody for joining. Look for this replay available in a couple hours in the LMS, and everybody have a good day.